Thank you very much for coming. We kind of went back and forth as to whether or not we were going to cancel the event due to the flood, but made a decision we would go ahead anyway. We do know that there are a lot of people who were saying they were going to come even as of today, but a lot has to do with whether or not they can get over the river and over 380. So, and it tends to be a little bit more difficult for our disability community because there's other issues involved as well in terms of transportation and things of that nature. But I do really appreciate all of you coming out to us and to speak with us tonight about some very important issues. As you're aware, over 19% of the population is self-identified as having a disability. That does not include caregivers and family members and those people who have not had an opportunity to self-identify as someone with a disability. I don't have the statistics in front of me as to the exact number of Iowans who will acquire a disability at some point in their life because of an accident or an illness or simply through the aging process. So it does we do represent more than the 19% in terms of a constituency. Because of a lot of the attention that Trump has given our community, the good news is, because he decided to bully us and make fun of us, it has brought us to a level where we're able to have more of a conversation. You know, thankfully, our Democratic representative, Hillary Clinton, has been working in this field for many, many years and has come up with some really great, solid policy, and is really going to look forward to implementing those on November the 9th in terms of getting our transition team in place. So we know that all politics is local, so driving it back home here, Iowa, we've really done a lot of great things. We have some movement that we need to make, though. It's been 26 years since the passage of the American with Disabilities Act. We still have businesses, we still have public facilities, we still have roads and streets and handicap parking spots that are not in compliance with the American with Disabilities Act. And several other acts as amended. We'd like to be able to use an approach of a carrot in terms of how we move forward and not a hammer. We want for our legislators to be able to feel as though you can have a conversation with us, and that we want to be able to have a seat at the table so that we can come with solutions that are going to work for everyone. And that's what this is the beginning of that discussion is tonight. We want to remain committed to come out to vote for each and every one of you, and we are looking forward to the next letter we write about our listening post is that you are all our elected officials and not candidates for office. So with that, I would like to just start with a brief, if you could just give a brief introduction, and if, has everybody had an opportunity to kind of look over the position papers that were sent out? Not really. It's okay. I mean, with the flood and everything else, stuff didn't get out as quickly as we had wanted to. But maybe when you get up to introduce yourself, starting with Brent, if there's an issue that you're aware of in particular that is a passion of yours around disability, please take a minute to speak to it, and then we'll kind of go from there. Sound good, Brent? You want to start us off?
Can I just, do I need the microphone or do you want? Okay. My name is Brent Oleson. I'm a Linn County Supervisor. My passion has always been conservation issues, but this also has been top of mind. We at the county have we've spent several $100,000 that people questioned at first on a consultant to look at our ADA accessibility from all of our county facilities and things that we're in charge of. One of those obviously is parks and trails, and we've made a lot of progress. That couple $100,000 that we were chided for spending was followed a year later by the the city of Cedar Rapids being forced to spend, was it $20 or $30 million over a period of time to make their town accessible and completely compliant with ADA standards. We've self-identified and we're having the time to do that. We can do it in a planned, thoughtful way that's fiscally responsible as well. So I've been working a lot on our new parks to make them all accessible for everyone. And so I've been able to combine that passion with this issue.
Great, thank you.
My name is Stacey Walker. I'm a candidate to be on the Linn County Board of Supervisors. I came here because this is a listening post, and I'm eager and interested to hear from folks about this very important issue of accessibility and how elected officials, and I'm hoping to be one come November, can impact this in a positive way. I was raised by a woman who had a few disabilities, and towards the end of her life, I was her primary caretaker. And so the issue of accessibility, the issue of how citizens can, with disabilities, whether or not they are visible or not, can fully participate in society is of particular interest to me. So, I'm here just to learn as much as I can and see how, if I'm fortunate enough to make it to the county board, how I might be an advocate for these issues.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Aime Wichtendahl. I'm on the Hiawatha City Council. I guess one of the reasons why I was eager to attend tonight's meeting was kind of a follow-up to a previous meeting that I had kind of on these issues. To learn that even in the 25 years since the passage of the American Disabilities Act, its implementation is still somewhat sporadic, or when it is, it's done minimally, and it still doesn't fully meet the accessibility of, a majority of our disabled citizens. So I'm eager to learn a little bit more on those lines and try to see how, I as an elected official can kind of further those goals.
My name is Ben Rogers. I'm a Linn County Supervisor. I represent the northeast side of Cedar Rapids, and the issues of disabilities and mental health are one of the two issues I'm most passionate about. And I see some of the challenges and opportunities around employment. I don't have to tell this group that people with disabilities have the highest rate of discrimination in the workplace, and that is something that we are trying to correct. I sit on the board of the ARC of East Central Iowa, and they are administering a program called Project Search, which is an international program that places people with disabilities within a work site, gives them three-month rotations in that environment to then make them competitively employed or successful in the workplace. The county has funded part of Project Search, and of the 20 participants that have gone through, 19 are now competitively employed, and one of them is earning full benefits. And so programs like that are needed, and we need to help educate business leaders that people with disability add to their bottom line, as well as being good for the social consciousness of their company. Another big hurdle that people with disabilities and policymakers are facing is with the managed care organizations. Particularly service providers are not being reimbursed quickly enough by the MCOs, and they are having to take out lines of credit, loans at banks, laying off staff, and that all impacts services. And the ADA, while celebrating its anniversary, was just in the news recently in Coralville for a bar and restaurant that was recently built that was not ADA compliant, and they had to not only pay a fine, but they're going to have to make the accommodations that they were supposed to in the beginning. So there are still a lot of challenges that people with disabilities face every day. There's still a lot of education that needs to be done, and there's a lot of work that can still be done to further people with disabilities being successful in the workplace. So thanks for holding this.
Hi everybody, I'm State Representative Liz Bennett. I represent Iowa House District 65, which is the southeast side of Cedar Rapids, southwest up to Wilson Avenue, and also the Mountain View neighborhood. on the northeast side. So I really appreciated the invitation to attend this event this evening. One of the things that has been important to me during the time that I've been an elected official, and prior to that as a community member, is listening directly to people and hearing people's concerns as expressed by them. There are some things that you simply can't understand the human impact of by reading policy papers or things on the internet or books. So really grateful for the opportunity to come and hear directly from the disabilities community about the things that are affecting people, that we can hopefully make some impacts on in the State House. A particular issue that I've been involved with as an advocate that certainly doesn't affect only the disabilities community, but that many people of the disabilities community have talked with me about during my time as a state representative, has been the issue of medical cannabis in Iowa. Establishing a meaningful medical cannabis program in the state of Iowa is something that can really ease a lot of suffering for a lot of people, can help people function in their day-to-day lives in a way which is much more consistent with what they would like to be doing. So that's something that I have been an advocate for and will continue to be an advocate for when I go back in January. And certainly looking for some ideas here today of things that I can make even more of an impact on. So again, thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. Representative Art Staed from Cedar Rapids. I too would support, continue to support making sure that everyone has equal access. In addition to that, there are a couple of bills that we've worked on in recent years. One was on the gas pump buttons, so that the elderly and people with disabilities that have a difficulty getting, even putting gasoline in your car, and particularly in the winter months and so on, that we have that as a statewide rule. We were unable to get that passed because of some extensive lobbying from some of the convenience stores. But I will continue to work on that. We also have had a bill the past few years, got further in the Senate than it did in the House, which was to provide resources, that's financial help, to individuals with disabilities who would like to make accommodations to their own homes, whether that be a grant, some kind of a financing up front, something better than just the tax rebate, because these individuals that have financial difficulties, they have the difficulty of actually having that happen in the first place, be able to have the money up front to make accommodations. And I think that's something that's worthy of all of us to do in the legislature. Thanks.
And just to mention that Senate file 509, correct, is the first one, and I don't remember what the second one was off the top of my head, but that's something that we'll put out on the Facebook pages that we need to be supporting, making sure that our legislators hear from us on the other side of the aisle.
Hello, my name is Kirsten Running-Marquardt, state representative, state legislator from the west side of Cedar Rapids. And I know most of you here in this room today. So, I've worked really hard on workforce development issues, accessibility, focusing on ability, focusing on equality in the workforce, in fairness. But what I think is most important here tonight is, I guess, if I could stand here to testify just a little bit. And I know that legislators usually want to talk about themselves as much as they possibly can when we get, not anybody at this table, but when they get the chance to stand and talk about somebody. But what we have here, we're standing in Hiawatha, or I'm standing right now in Hiawatha, and we have a state Senate race that is just absolutely critical. We have Senator Mathis, who is sitting to the left of me here, who is a tireless advocate, a champion for people with disabilities, not only in her real day job, but I see when we're working with, when we have case, we have, we're sort of like caseworkers at times when we have individuals who come in and their situations are sensitive. We're trying to figure that out. I bump into them. And Senator Mathis has been there not only for myself as a legislator, but when we're working with other people trying to figure out what to do. We are going to move back to the dark ages when it comes to the Iowa legislature, and I'm, it's not the county or the city here, but there has been so many things that the Senate has stopped because they had one vote. They had the power to stop things that were unfair, unequitable, and things that would have not made the people's lives who do have disability even barely at a even footing. So I guess I'd like to stand up here to say, I myself, I've worked on some issues dealing with the disability community, but we have a lot more work to do. But we can't get there if at minimum we don't hold the Senate and the Iowa House. I want us to be in charge in the Iowa House, and you know what, we're moving big grounds to get there. But if we lose Senator Mathis' Senate seat, and she didn't pay me to say any of this here, she did though let me borrow a pen, which I have in my purse. I have a nut cup, I've got a pair of scissors, I got a knife, and I've got about 10 other things, but I didn't
Ready
have a
for
pen.
end times then.
I know, we're ready.
Go.
I don't even use the nut cup, but for anybody who is here in this area, especially, if you can help Senator Mathis by calling your friends and family, door knocking, going to the headquarters and phone calling. I know not everybody in here is Democrat, and that's fine, that's, whatever, but it's such an important seat and such an important race that, I don't know, this is a listening post, so I'm gonna sit down and listen from now on, but I just cannot reiterate how important where we're sitting here in Hiawatha and what the Senate seat means to us, and us as the community that is disability community and those that support them as well. So there we go. Ta-da!
And I didn't pay her to do that, but that was very nice. Thank you very much.
Will you let me borrow your pen?
The father of the ADA, Tom Harkin, spoke at a fundraiser for me in 2011. And he pulled me aside and he said, Liz, how you doing? And I said, well, it's quite a leap from being a journalist into being a politician. It's very different. Now I am, being asked the tough questions, and before I was asking the tough questions, right? So, and I have to choose up a side. So I'm not going to serve it up anymore like I used to as a journalist and let you decide. Now I have to make that decision, or I have to have an opinion that's relevant to the situation. So he said to me, well, what kind of advice can I give you? And I said, well, when someone asks you a tough question and you just don't know the answer, how do you answer? And he said, he reached in his pocket and he pulled out a card, and the card had the word fair on it. And he said, whenever someone asks me a question, I always bring it down to, is this fair? And he said, that takes me back to the ADA. And is this fair? Now imagine how difficult it was to pass the Americans with Disabilities Act. I mean, we can't even get EpiPen through some days, right? We have to fight tooth and nail to get that past our GOP people. I mean, and it's not any big deal, right? The EpiPen should have been a no-brainer. So the ADA is such an important piece of legislation at a federal level and at a state level. But he had that constant guide in his pocket, the word fair. And that's what it is all about. Is it fair? So I chair the Health and Human Services Policy Committee, and I'm very proud to do that. And a lot of bills that come through are a benefit to the disabled community. And sometimes the disabilities you can see, and sometimes you can't. My son had one that you could not see. My mother had one that you could, and hers was Parkinson's. She was wheelchair bound for many years. And I have to say, that is one of the reasons that I ran for office, because I saw my 85-year-old father struggling to try to find a restroom. I mean, and it's so much more than just about restrooms, but he tried to find a restroom at that time that he could take my mother into, and he couldn't. There were no unisex restrooms, no family restrooms. He was trying to figure out, where they could go and at what time of day could they go. And she finally just said, I'm not going to go at all. I just don't even want to go out. And so began this kind of this sheltered life where she didn't want to go at it all because my dad, you know, they just couldn't maneuver it. He was getting older, he couldn't handle the wheelchair. She just didn't want to bother, and so their lives started to evolve into something different. And so I vowed that, you know, we need to do something different about that, and we have evolved in some situations. But there are things about, I think about how Dale Todd influenced us in a bill that came before us about prescription drugs, about drugs for epilepsy, and about asking doctors, no, mandating that doctors prescribe the same types of drugs for epilepsy, the best drugs for epilepsy that they can. And it was much more complicated than that. But we fought tooth and nail to get that out on the floor, and we did pass that in the Senate. But I tell you what, the GOP didn't want to pass it. They didn't want mandatory controls on people. Despite the fact that there was a GOP member that said, well, my sister has epilepsy, but I'm not voting for this. I thought that was, I just said, all right, we've reached the end of the road here. This is pretty bad. So it's very important that, just like Kirsten said, to vote in the people that are going to believe in the same value system that you have. And there's a value around this, right? There's a value around understanding, thank you, do I look like I need it? Yeah. The disability community, what they face, how we can make things more fair. And that's why we're all here.
Thank you very much. We've had a couple other people join us since, so that's good.
Thanks, Frank.
Thanks.
Keep them coming, Frank.
I can do that.
What I'd like to do is, we have some prepared statements here, but instead of reading those off, and those are things that you all have in your inboxes somewhere, and also on our Facebook page as well. I'd like to open this up, so I'm gonna stand back here so that I can kind of see everybody. So I'd like to open it up to our disability community in terms of, are there any questions? What are your questions? What are your concerns? This is your opportunity to speak. Bernard.
I first would like to thank all y'all for showing up. I'm really pleasantly surprised to see all y'all here. Y'all could have found other places to be, but you really should be applauded for being here. One thing that I'm concerned about is, I believe by a certain date, but maybe 2025, that all public buildings in Linn County should be universally accessible. That includes school buildings and whatever else is built. That a timeline be set for. I know these things are expensive, but a timeline should be set to make all buildings, all public buildings in Linn County universally accessible. That would be the sample to all private people. If anybody in the state want to know how to do it, anybody in the county want to know. Linn County, Cedar Rapids, Hiawatha, all the political entities within the county would be able to set the sample for how it's supposed to be done. And on the minimum wage, on the minimum wage thing, I hope that ends up being state, but if that does not end up being a state law, even if it does end up being a state law, it should be tied to consumer price index, so it does not have to be revisited. So it doesn't have to be revisited again. That's how I believe that it should be done. And that's about all I got to say. I can't think of nothing else. And thank you again for showing up.
Thank you.
So, I guess one of the questions that I have from you is, this has been going on for a number of years, 25, 26 years now. It's frustrating not being able to get into buildings, because if we can't get through the door, we can't be heard in our public places, and we can't even be consumers if we can't get through the front door. So I'd like to open it up here to a couple of suggestions that you might have for us as to how is it we need to package things, how is it we need to approach these things so that we can have a voice and be heard.
I would say to relate your experience, because the experience of what it is that we're missing. For instance, bathroom doors, right, that don't have a push button or that it makes it difficult to get through. We may think that that's, you know, if you're able-bodied or that's not an issue, that may just sort of pass our radar, or we should be more mindful that the nature of wheelchairs are changing. So the base is, I think the standard is 36 inches for some certain doorways, but some wheelchairs are 42 inches. So understanding that the nature of devices are changing, and it's just informing us how we can better retrofit, change, or rebuild our buildings to make it either better, more ADA accessible, or I know that there's I think a higher level, well, ADA is the minimum, but making it, the universal design concepts that make it more easily accessible for people with disabilities. So going above just the minimum, but pointing out what is the minimum and how can it be improved.
So how would we go about doing that? Do we email you? Do we call you? Do we come to the, State
All the
House?
above.
What do we do? And how do we get a return phone call? How do we get a return email? Maybe Art, you had a suggestion?
Well, I was saying, first thing is making us aware. If I don't have a disability that makes me aware, it's just like the gas pump stuff. I had no idea, absolutely no idea. Once Jade Henry shared that with me, that became an issue for me, but before that it wouldn't be. And I guess that's the first thing. And in terms of responding, you expect and demand every elected officials to respond. They have an obligation to do that.
I think,
The county, we have designated some of the certain employees as to be liaisons for that issue back to us too. And we have a council of citizens as well that bring those issues with facilities and other things up. So we've been able to address them on a reporting basis. And internally, the employees and our human resources issues have been able to internally report them. So we have people that are engaged both internally and externally on those issues.
So then it would be a matter of getting in touch with who those folks.
Yeah, we have that on our website.
And you have, okay.
There's a gentleman that lives near Prairie-Burg that's on there. We have, we appointed them to make us aware of those issues.
All right, thank you. Liz?
I'd say, many times when these decisions come right down to the end, it's about money, right? It's about saying to someone, you have to pay for this, or we have to pay for this, or how will we pay for it? So let me take a tact, it might be a little bit different. But as legislators, we can do only what we can do as individuals, and then when we join forces as Democrats or Republicans, then you can join forces that way. But you also need to join forces. You need to join forces with the Home Builders Association. You need to join forces with the convenience stores. You need to join forces with some other groups and work with them so that you work with them at the beginning of the process, not at the end of the process. Or when you see that certain things aren't being met, like they are not ADA compliant, then when you build partnerships with groups, there's a better understanding. And then you have a larger force that you can come at that bill, the policy, or you can create policy as a unified force. So whether it's, not only the Home Builders Association, but just the Builders Association across the state, to make sure that you start talking with the right people, that you're working together to create this knowledge, to create this there's anecdotal information, and then there's data, right? And it's a great, and that there's an even balance between being able to tell a story, but then to be able to show, like you were saying, commerce. If you're prevented from getting to some place to spend your money or to do something, That's dollars and cents. That's something that people will understand in that way. And if you can show that through data and anecdotal information, then you're gonna get farther. And then it isn't an individual trying to convince each and every legislator. Then all of a sudden, you've got this force behind you. So.
I agree with Senator Mathis's comments. She kind of laid out the tactician's approach to getting things done. But you know, I'm a community organizer at my core, and I believe that there is still a long ways to go in terms of legislative action that we can get at the state house level. Perhaps there's some things we can do at the county level, and certainly there's some things we can do at the federal level. To call out Dale Todd, he's been a force for some action at the federal level. When it boils down to basically taking legislators out of the medical process and letting medical doctors do their job. And I think that's important. So, you know, I'm a big fan. We need all sorts of people in our political process. We need the donor class, we need activists, but in my worldview, one of the most critical components of our democracy is direct action, and the ability to demonstrate power in numbers. And if our colleagues on the other side of the aisle can't see the virtue in making sure our facilities are accessible, can't see the virtue of getting out of the way of medical professionals, can't see the virtue of talking about mental illness, then we ought to let them know that as the people's representatives, we're not going to stand for that. So I'm a big fan of direct action. I think there are compelling stories to be told all across the board when it comes to ability and disabilities, I think that works. Certainly, we need to build coalitions, as Senator Mathis pointed out. If we can get more people on board of our cause, it tends to carry more weight as legislation matriculates through whatever body it's in at the moment. But direct action has always been a force throughout history in making a point and encouraging progress.
Thank you. And Joy, you were next, then Harvey, then we'll go back to the panel.
I just had
Okay.
one quick thing I wanted to
Okay.
add. Being the only member on like a city or municipal level, I do want to say, at least in that is how it, on that, we're the level of government that's actually closest to the people. We're actually the level of government that doesn't have to be controlled solely by partisan things. So I think what could really help in that nature is coming to these council meetings and coming to the, speaking during the open forum and the public forum. In August, we had an 11-year-old boy who was dealing with the MDS, and was actually raising money or looking for a resolution for the fire department to go ahead and do the fill the boot. But one of the things that still sticks out in my mind is not only, we all have some kind of familiarity with what this charity is, but we don't really know how much of a difference it makes in their lives. And he laid out how this would improve his life, how it could extend his life, how he could get out and meet other people that deal with that. And those are the kind of emotional impacts that make a difference and can be affected at that level of government.
Thank you. Joy? Okay, I have a whole bunch of stuff to say, and like, nobody's gonna like me. We are long past making our officials aware. This is a law. This is civil rights legislation. It's enforced by the Department of Justice. Why are we talking about giving little pieces of cute anecdotal information? And I'm sorry, Liz, you don't even know me. You probably will, again, you'll hit me by the end of the meeting. But that's what we tried before the ADA. I was injured just before the ADA was passed. And that's what we tried. We tried giving them data. We tried giving them anecdotal information. It came down to dollars and cents. Nobody cared, okay? Nobody cared. And so the only thing that started to make things happen was the passage of the ADA. That's the only thing, was there would be a threat of a lawsuit. That for the first time in history, we can sue. No nobody's talking about that. Like, that's a big deal. Now, I'm not talking about just, you know, frivolous lawsuits, but I'm talking about real lawsuits. And I have friends who were significantly discriminated against in the workforce, were not given reasonable accommodations, which is a legal term within the ADA, and they did sue and they did win. And you can't get, monetary, you know, thank you, whatever, monetary, from a lawsuit. You can't benefit financially from a lawsuit, from an ADA lawsuit. You can only, the money can only be used towards fixing the situation. Unless you, unless it had to do with, I think, when you have when you've lost income because of it, or something like that. 20 years ago, in Minneapolis, the issue being enforcement. The issue being enforcement. I could say that 100 times. The issue is enforcement. We already have a law. And 20 years ago in Minneapolis, they hired an ADA specialist who was there to make sure that every single plan that went across the board, whether that was on whatever level, but I think this was on the city level, this would have been Minneapolis, so on the city level, every single plan that went across the city level to be approved in every other code that exists. That ADA code specialist also made sure that the ADA code was enforced. And what she fought were the architects. And the architects didn't want to change whatever it is that their design, their beautiful design. This was a huge issue when it came to the Mall of America. That the architects had this sort of artistic design, and the ADA code specialist came in, as well as the activists, and said, you can't thwart the ADA for this artistic vision. I mean, we can try and you know, come together and I do believe that you can make accessibility artistically beautiful. I do believe that, and I think it just takes a little bit of creative thought. But when architects aren't used to being challenged, they can bark back and not want to be told that they have to make some changes. And I wanted to ask Aime about, since you're on the Hiawatha City Council, why this building isn't ADA compliant. And it's, I don't know how many years after the ADA, and all this is code. This is just code. This isn't saying, oh gee, you know, feel sorry for me because I can't get the door, you know, by myself. And that's not what makes change. We already have a civil rights law, and why it's not being forced is beyond me, when I've lived in a city like Minneapolis who prioritized enforcement and actually got things done. This bar and core bill makes no sense to me. You know, who's passing this this design, this building design? What code enforcers are passing these building designs and saying that they're fine? I know I'm going through a lot of it, but you can all answer my questions and respond to what I'm saying. When it comes to the gas pump thing, that's an extra thing that is now come up. There already exists within the ADA a reasonable accommodation that if you can't pump the gas yourself, that someone in the convenience store will pump it for you. Now, getting a hold of that person is what the issue has been is the buttons that alert somebody inside don't always work. So that is actually the issue, is making sure those buttons work. I mean, first and foremost, that's the issue. Before we talk about universal design, before we talk about going past the ADA, let's just focus on enforcing what we have, what we fought so hard for. But so sometimes what I do is, if the button doesn't work, then I actually, I just call information and I get the phone number. And I call inside the store and I say, I'm right outside and I use a wheelchair and I need somebody to pump my gas. And they say, no problem, we'll be right out. Boom. But that does come under the reasonable accommodation. They are required to provide me with that reasonable accommodation that already exists within the ADA. And the last thing I want to say is I just want some attention to language. And again, used to live in Minneapolis where we were right on top of it, right on top of the language, especially media when it came to language. And we don't, and I apologize, again, I don't want to offend anyone, but wheelchair bound is an outdated term. And if you look in, when it comes to language within the ADA and it comes to the media and language, disabled is the legal term right now, people with disabilities, or you could say someone who uses a wheelchair, a person who uses a wheelchair, but obviously wheelchair bound kind of went out after crippled. It tended to be like an old person term, so please pay attention to language. It is important. It's okay, Joy. I'm
You know
done.
why they don't fix that stuff? Because they don't give a damn.
Well, anyway, we've got this awesome group, and I said my piece, and I'm done.
Thank you. Okay, so Kirsten, you want a response? And Amy wants to respond, I know, to the disability issue, but I think Kirsten.
I don't think anybody's going to hate you for anything that you said today at all, anyone at this table, and not hate you, but quite the opposite. I very much appreciate your voice, and I'm not just giving lip service to that. At the state capitol, and then also, when we're home, I mean, this is where we live, our families are here, that there are organizations and groups in the disability rights and in other organizations that they advocate constantly. And but we need to continue to have forums like this where Catherine Crist, who she emails me or calls me, I'll call her back and email her back. I had to wait to see if I could come here tonight though. So it took me a day to get back, or 2 or 3 days, sorry Catherine, to say for sure not I could come, but your issues are critical because you are a critical part of our population and you're our family and you're our, so I hear what you're saying. I know we can all do better. I think some of the people who could do much better, they're not here tonight to listen. But what you do is you encourage us and you kind of get us pumped up to go back in and to say, hey, to check ourselves and say, are we doing all we can to be fair, to be equitable for all populations? And so I appreciate you. Many others I'm sure do as well, for your energy and for you sitting here, reminding us and talking to us. And we all know what a gift. Thank God for the ADA. But we could do better. And so I appreciate you hearing you. And then it's good to hear what other states are doing. Minneapolis. I hate for Minnesota to kick our butt in anything. But it's good to hear, your perspective from another state as well. And so it challenges us to do better at a state level, county, city level. And we need you and that energy, and also the advocacy groups across the state of Iowa that not just like chapters or locals here at the state, but they need your energy as well too, and your knowledge and your know-how. And so, because we rely on them often at the Capitol when we have something that comes up so fast. And then, I know there's people I can call Dale, or there's other people in the advocacy, disability rights advocacy community from my community. And so I use you as a resource as well. And it sounds like you'd be willing to be a resource for other people because you're very knowledgeable in this.
Why is the Department of Justice not the resource?
I'm saying they, of course, should be the resource. They, of course, should be handling things much better. But the things that we can work on at the state level, I'm just being selfish saying that because I'm state rep. I appreciate hearing from you tonight, and then possibly in the future too, that your energy and your knowledge, that we can it's not right, it's not perfect. I've never seen a policy piece come out that's been perfect or correct or anything, but we need, that's why this is so important, and you have so many elected officials here tonight, because we do care, and we do wanna fix things and help and move forward in things to make a fair, equitable society.
Okay, Amy?
Yes. There's a couple things I did want to bring up from your concern. I think you kind of asked why we're still dealing with this 25 years later. I think that there is a component within human nature to say, okay, the bill was passed, you know, everything's equal now, not realizing that all the battles take place afterwards. And I think, you know, when you come talking to succeeding generations, you know, legislators and people like myself who come into local government far down the road when these laws are passed, we don't always know the ins and outs of it until it's brought directly to us. You know, like I said, I was here because this is a continuation of a conversation I had previously, because someone brought the attention to me that, you know, there were no buttons on that door.
No, the ramp's not code.
Yeah.
The ramp itself isn't code.
Okay. But basically, that is a little bit shocking to me, because I know this is a new building, and I know that, and it is a little bit unfathomable to me that they didn't go through all of these things when they designed it. So, you know, it is something that I, you know, want to make sure that we can correct it, to make sure that our buildings are accessible, and to go ahead and make everything accessible that we can to all of our citizens, our residents, and the people who visit here. So that, but, you know, had I not had that conversation, I would have known none of this. So I do thank all of you for bringing this up, and I will do what I can at my level to try to correct these issues.
Joy, I will also, I guess, share everyone's concerns, or I guess appreciation for your concerns. Echo what I said earlier.
Yeah.
Direct action matters. And to comment on a comment that you made, lawsuits also matter. It's been how many years since the Civil Rights Act 1964, 1965 passed? I'm a black man living in a society that has trouble seeing my value. And you think about to sort of put this into context, why direct action and lawsuits matter even after the big landmark pieces of legislation. Think about the civil rights movement, and I will need to be fact-checked here on this, but I think Thurgood Marshall argued some 22 cases before the Supreme Court, of which he won over a dozen. Most attorneys in their career don't even come close to working on a Supreme Court case. The civil rights movement was a movement of direct action and people bringing suit when enforcement wasn't happening. And I think if we look at the Americans with Disabilities Act, it's still one of the best things that ever happened to this country. But we know around the country and even in our own communities, enforcement doesn't always happen. So I understand you being upset, and that's a good thing. And I think our job as public officials and elected leaders is to channel this energy and figure out ways in which we can make changes at the policy level. And if that can't happen because folks on the other side of the aisle, again, don't see the virtue, then it's up to the energy that you express and the energy in this movement to influence electoral outcomes so that we get more people in office that is willing and able to affect change.
Ben, and then to Dale.
Okay. I love that.
And I just before
Yeah.
I know that we are already into the dinner portion, but, you know, if folks could bear with us because we did
This is an important topic.
Yeah, it's an important topic, and we did get kicked off to a later start due to people having difficulty getting to the meeting tonight. So I appreciate that. Would anybody mind if they opened up so folks could
Nope.
start eating?
Nope.
So Joe, if you want to open up, I know he's ready to go, and if everybody doesn't mind us continuing for a little while,
while
And
we're eating.
Catherine, you might want to tell people that this is the disability led forum that you're.
Right. So for
Caucus.
those of you who are unaware, this is a listening post for the Disability Caucus of Linn County. And so our elected officials from Linn County, as well as for those folks who are candidates, came here tonight to talk with us about issues that are relevant to our particular community. So thank you very much for bearing with us as we run a little bit over time. And Joe, if we want to let Joe know he can open up, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, go ahead, Ben.
I really appreciate sort of calling us out on that. The language matters, really enforcement matters. But as you can see, some of us are either new to politics or haven't been around in politics since the ADA, and you have constant turnover of elected officials. So just because there's a law doesn't mean that it's readily understood. And particularly a law as complicated and as involved as the ADA. So that requires constant training, constant awareness, constant attention. I just went to a PADS disabilities forum where the subject matter expert was talking about service animals, and we have a service animal here. And there are bus drivers who don't know that they can't, that they can only ask 2 questions. Like they see someone with a dog and they assume that's their pet, and the person will start coming on the bus and they're like, whoa, you can't come on here. Well, no, this is my dog. Well, there's only 2 questions that a bus driver can ask that person. Is that a service animal? And what service does it perform for you? A lot of people don't understand that, so they just either are naturally, they'll just, yeah, sure, come on in, or they'll, no, you can't, this is a bus, you can't bring your pet on. So even though it's the law, and even though the person might say, no, I'm allowed to under ADA, this is a reasonable accommodation, etc., it's that constant training, constant awareness. And the double-edged sword about the Department of Justice is, it is a resource. But I think people might feel that if they call for that resource, it's then, they're going to receive like a DOJ audit, or all of a sudden now that you're on the DOJ's radar, if you're asking us about ramp slopes and curb cuts, and hey, they might be afraid that brings attention to them. So it's one of those unintended consequences of having a really great resource, is that they're also the enforcement mechanism. And I think that's why we're seeing like the city of Cedar Rapids, who didn't do theirs for a long time, all of a sudden now having to make major changes to their infrastructure because they just didn't for a long time. And maybe it's because they didn't reach out to the DOJ, and now they're having to spend millions of dollars very quickly to do something they should have done a long time ago. So it's a brilliant point that you make, and if I would be frustrated if I felt like, God, why do I have to tell someone this over and over again? It's only because it's complex in terms of how you design, and again, it's the bare minimum. And to Amy's point, particularly for younger people, once a law is sort of established, you think, people are already taking care of it. The ramp exists, the doors are, so we must be meeting code, or else this place would be shut down. But really, there are so many areas where we can improve to universal design concepts, so it's just not, we're meeting the minimum so we don't get a lawsuit. It's that we're stepping up above so that people, ADA to me also means EIM, everyone is welcome. And that's what we need to design to, is that idea that everyone is welcome.
Thank you. Dave?
A rump.
Ben
Yeah.
really, Ben brought it home there. In this respect, that you talked about architects. The architects know the ADA, but usually there is an owner or a developer or a government body. Somebody's telling that architect either we want your specs to meet the bare minimum or to exceed. And so what you want to do, you want to create an environment where they understand, they're educated, and they sort of want to do the Spike Lee, do the right thing. You know, you can easily do a playground that meets the bare minimum. That means you have 2 or 3 events that are on the ground. But why wouldn't you want to do something that's got ramps where somebody in a wheelchair can get to the highest place on that playground? So you want to create that environment. And unfortunately, you got to do a lawsuit every now and then. And when that point comes in time, you ask yourself, is it the intent? Were they purposely trying to circumvent the intent of the ADA? If that's the case, sue them. Get rid of them. Take them to the press. Embarrass them. Shame them. But if they didn't understand or dumb, quite frankly, there's a lot of small convenience store owners in Iowa that think they're doing the right thing. They might they have done that, they have gotten beat up about it, basically because of the so-called cost. You can build things actually cheaper sometimes if you do it right. And just because you want to exceed the bare minimum doesn't necessarily mean that that's gonna cost more to do the right thing. In all honesty, that might generate more customers, and it might be cheaper. I have to say, and this is sort of on a different topic to a degree, but our delegation, you guys, this has been a defining week in your career. And I just want to stress, Tom Harkin, his legacy will be ADA. And by the, what I mean there is that one person really can do a lot. And when I chaired the Iowa Commission on Mental Health, I thought mental health issues were gonna be easy. I thought this would be just like project management. Chuck Holder was in office, we had Democrats in the Senate and the House. I thought it would just be money. It was the most complicated issue and most frustrating issue, because at the same time, the special interests, you fight it every day there. You're fighting the insurance lobby, you're fighting the pharmacy lobby, you are fighting the most powerful special interest groups in the Capitol. And when you get us all together, our disability community, we are, I mean, you talk about a goofy bunch of people when we all get together. But when it comes down to it, we simply don't have the muscle that the other economic development interests and the other folks there in the Capitol use to make things happen. So until we come together as one, it's gonna be an uphill battle. But I am so proud of the work that Liz and you guys do at the county. I mean, we are incredibly lucky here in Linn County. So thank you for all you do, and especially thank you for this week. I saw you all out there sandbagging, and very, very proud of all of you.
Thanks, Dale.
I wanted to talk just about a couple of things about I worked on the convenience store bill for 2 years, and I learned a lot from that. I learned that there's a very broad range in what is reasonable accommodations. I went around and around with Tom Larkin, who was Tom Harkin's on his staff, and then he gave me to 3 people who are experts on the ADA, and I kept saying, give me the definition, what are the ranges? So if Hy-Vee puts in a button that's that big, that might work for some people in the disabled community, but not all people. We put a fist button, that might work for most of the disabled community, but not all. If I'm traveling across the rural areas of Iowa, and like you said, you used a telephone, not all the disabled community can call on a telephone, so that was kicked out. We used it, we said, well, it's this day and age, not everyone has a digital phone, not everyone has a phone that they can use. So what is reasonable accommodation? So Senator Todd Bowman's dad used to own a mom and pop shop, standard gas station, and he said, well, let's just put a sign up. Let's just put a sign up and say, it says, honk your horn if you need help.
Honestly,
we were going,
I would be okay with that.
seriously?
If it was in a
But
rural
not
area, that
everybody
was all they
can honk
had.
their horn.
But they wouldn't come
Not
out.
everybody may be able to do that. Not everyone is able to staff an extra person who can leave the counter and
There is
come and
that.
pump your gas and still
There
run
is
a
that.
service station. So our discussion was very deep and very wide, and it kept churning and churning and churning. So we kept going back to what is reasonable accommodation. And I so agree with you. It is law. It is law, and we have to enforce it. But there are these areas within the law that we will forever be, what is the descriptive? What are the defining pieces of this? How wide? How long is it? And that's why we go to court over it, right? That's why we go to court and say to a judge, define this. So these lawmakers made this thing over here. Now, someone has to define it. And that's how we are gonna move forward. You're right. You're absolutely right.
Harvey and then Barb, and then we're gonna have to wrap it up, so, Harvey.
I just had a quick one that is way too late in the game, but When you're a person with a hidden disability, it's easy to sit here and think you're the only one, so don't bother to ask. But I have a 25% hearing loss, and other than 30% of you up there, I've had trouble hearing you half of the time. So I'm only asking that you remember in an audience this big to please speak up, because there might be other people that are just a little embarrassed to admit they're having trouble hearing you.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you for being here and thank you for being the voice of the community for those who can't speak for themselves. I just want to say that there are people in the disability community that have things like PTSD, or you brought up something about service dogs, and there was a case, I think it was in Lisbon, where somebody was in a bar and he had a service dog, and the bar owner was not happy that he had a service dog in the bar. Maybe you guys remember that case. And you know, it's really difficult when somebody questions your disability and then it turns out they turn into a fight. You know, I think the big thing is to always have this proactive, interactive conversation with your community, and you guys are the people to always have that proactive, interactive conversation, and that's why we have a disability caucus, because we're representing our community, and you are also representing the larger community, and we can always have that conversation without embarrassing people or without embarrassing ourselves in the community. So it's a great relationship that we can have without, and giving you a voice for us, without, and constantly improving on the ADA. And that's, I think, the point I want to make, is that we're here to constantly improve on what Tom Harkin has started. And we are the stakeholders, and you're the stakeholders, and there are also stakeholders at large, and there's some best practices that we have to learn through each other and other stakeholders in the community. I mean, there are other instances that we're learn from other communities, like the news that we're hearing about people with disabilities that are getting shot by the police because there are issues with their disabilities with their hearing and understanding about what's going on. So there are so many issues that we can be proactive about, that we can learn from our other communities. And that's what the ongoing best practice, I like to think of it as a round table that's constantly happening, not just in our community, but in other communities that we're seeing. In North Carolina, here's a black man that has a disability, he had a traumatic brain injury, and maybe he's all the confusion in the community, he's not understanding what's going on, and who knows what he's going through while there are several policemen around him. You know, anything that's happening. You know, I just think that it's important to understand that we're always learning, improving, and the events in the news can help you to understand things, and that hearing the feedback that we're giving you, it's a constant round table. Look at it that way.
Thank you, Barb. Thank you for attending. Thank you for indulging us with your patience here for the last several minutes. I would like to have another disability listening post after the election and before a lot of you take off in January to go to the State House. Does that sound like something you'd be interested in doing?
Please.
Okay, all right.
It may be at a client location if you want to.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you
No,
very
thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joy.